Like the title says, there is more to recovery than the number on the scale. And today we will look at a lot of numbers together for you to realize and understand why the number on the scale is of less importance. Numbers may not be the best thing for our eating disorder patients, and since it frequently increases their obsession, we mostly share trends from the tests we use in order to educate them about how their body has coped to their often reduced intake and or increased exercise. When they understand and accept how their body works and why what they have been doing doesn't work, then we can give them hope, tools, and motivation for recovery. This will all make sense to you as we move along with the presentation. How often do you have a patient that does not want to gain weight once their menses have resumed? Because doesn't that mean that they are healthy? Or a patient that is weight restored but still very tired and symptomatic, maybe not eating enough for the amount of exercise they do daily. Or a patient who continues to gain weight well above their recommended weight, even though the caloric intake is not excessive. After all, we don't want them to gain too much weight. Or a worried mother whose teenage daughter is eating less at home and eating less in general and exercising more, but the pediatrician says she's fine. All blood work were within normal ranges. So when the teenager comes in and I ask, "How can I help you?" she shrugs and says, "Nothing wrong with me. Mom thinks I have a problem that I'm not eating enough." Well, I ask, "Are you willing to do 2 tests? And if okay, you proved mom wrong?" And they always agree, especially since the blood work from the pediatrician's visit came back normal. I have yet to have a mother that was wrong, and I'll cover all the above situations in the presentation. Today, I'll explain how we use the body composition analysis in combination with metabolic testing with eating disorder patients, and how to interpret these 2 tests with eating disorder patients, and to recognize the key role that body composition analysis and metabolic testing can play in helping move the patient towards full recovery and to avoid relapse. And I can say that because of experience, either from patient that I send to inpatient treatment or patient that comes to me after discharge, who unfortunately frequently aren't fully recovered. This is what the body composition test looks like. It's quick, takes a minute or two, it's non-invasive, and it's done at every visit. And as you can see, electrodes are placed on the right hand and the right foot, and a very weak current is going through the right side of the body. Different tissues in the body have different connectivity or impedance, and the body composition analysis measures reactance and resistance as a current travels through the water that is found in muscle and fat. Water has no resistance, and muscle is about 75% water and has more resistance, and fat is only 10% water and has most resistance. You think about a stick of butter that has more resistance, right? So this technology, with modern technology, provides measurements. And 20 years ago, we had about 6 of them, ways to measure water, muscle, and fat. And today there are 12. And we have things like lean soft tissue, bone mineral content, face angle, etc. added. Now, why is body composition analysis important? Well, it helps us assess how the body has responded to being underfed. And knowing their muscle mass, it helps us determine how much protein we should recommend. And it also helps us assess the risk for bone health, like osteopenia and osteoporosis, as well as assessing the risk for refeeding edema. And only body composition can determine how much muscle or fat have been lost or gained as a result of our food recommendations. In other words, there's no more guessing because we know what has changed and thus know also how to correct it. Face angle is one of the newer measurements, and it is an indicator of cellular health and integrity. And today it's recognized as a global health marker in the total body health assessment. Why is it important? Because cells are the building blocks of all tissues, muscle, bone, enzyme, brain chemicals, hormones, and organs in our body. And a low face angle is consistent with malnutrition and an inability of cells to store energy, as well as an indication of breakdown of cellular membrane. This is an example of body composition analysis. This is a bulimic female. She's 17 years old. She's 5'6" and weighs 130 pounds. And we're going to look at her total weight, the lean weight, the fat weight, the BCM, body cell mass, which is the muscle mass, and her face angle. So this patient is binging and purging 4 to 6 times a day, and her weight decreased 5 pounds in 2 months. So for her, it's working. But the lean weight decreased 10 pounds in 4 months, and fat weight increased 5 pounds in 4 months. And the BCM, the dry lean, decreased 5 pounds in 4 months. And the face angle decreased from 6'4" to 5'8" in 4 months. So this patient, she was happy that she had lost 5 pounds. That's all she cared about, was to lose more. But after 4 months, she still couldn't stop the purging and needed to be hospitalized. Also, when we see 10 pounds of fat-free mass, the lean weight having decreased, this is a high, and being below minimum, this is a high risk for osteopenia and osteoporosis, especially if they also have secondary amenorrhea. Now, we never share the body composition analysis numbers with the patient. We only share the trends with them. Otherwise, they get too obsessed about it. And we try to educate them what got worse and what got better, and always for them to understand why the numbers changed. The other test is metabolic testing, which is another way to evaluate the current nutritional status by indirect calorimetry. This test measures oxygen inhaled and carbon dioxide exhaled, because every calorie you consume requires a fixed amount of oxygen in order to be converted to energy. It measures the oxygen to calculate calories burned. And it provides substrate utilization, which shows us how the body uses its own protein, fat, and carbohydrate as fuel. This is how it looks. You have normal breathing under a hood for about 20 minutes. As you can see, it's non-invasive, but we only do this every 6 to 8 weeks because it takes about 2 months to correct a hypometabolic state. Metabolic testing via indirect calorimetry provides a means of measuring energy expenditure. In other words, how many calories are they burning? And it helps establish appropriate recommendation for the nutritional management of the patient, because if the patient weighs 150, 250, or 350 pounds, they would all have different caloric need. It also provides information about how the body adapts to an underfed state, because if underfed, the metabolic rate will likely be low, or we call it hypometabolic, and we can see by how much, letting us know the severity of the restriction. Factors that affect metabolic testing would be food, so we want them ideally to come in fasting, overnight fasting, or at least not having had any food for 4 hours prior to testing. Also, no exercise and no caffeine or other stimulating drugs prior to the test that same day. This is an example. This is a 38-year-old female. She is 5'4" and weighs 128 pounds. And you see the dark blue box, it says 1321. That's her PREE, standing for Predicted Resting Energy Expenditure, based on Harris-Benedict formula. And if you are within plus minus 10% of the PREE, the predicted metabolism, then you are normal. But if you look at the light blue box, that's her number. That's actual resting energy expenditure. And her number is 784, meaning she is 500 calories at least below the predicted and thus hypometabolic. Here we have added substrate utilization, which you can see on the left, and that means how the body is using its own protein, fat, and carbohydrate as fuel. Normal substrate utilization is here displayed with dark blue bars. And a normal healthy body, as you can see, gets fueled mostly by burning fat, and then also small amounts from protein, which is our own muscle, and very small amounts from carbohydrates from the blood sugar. The light blue bars show us how the patient is using his or her own protein, fat, and carbohydrate for fuel. And in this example, we have a protein substrate utilization of 22% above normal. Means that the patient is not eating enough and thus breaking down her own muscle for fuel, more at 22% above what's normal, pre-aging her body, which is also called sarcopenia. That's expensive fuel to eat up your own muscle. And if we look at the fat, you see that is 20% below normal. And that means that the body is threatened because of not getting enough food or fuel, and thus storing fat. The K person brain is saying, I'll save your life by reducing your metabolism and storing fat. The carbohydrate after an overnight fasting, we shouldn't have any sugar left to burn. But if this is high, it's an indication of insufficient breakdown of carbohydrates, and we need to figure out why. It may be easily corrected with improved eating habits, better quality food. But if not, we'd like to do blood work to rule out if it could be insulin resistant present. In this example, the patient had been eating only 1,000 calories a day, meaning she'd been dieting the last couple of weeks prior to her reunion. And when we asked, aren't you tired? She said, I'm a single mom, 2 small kids, I'm always tired. So our recommendation was that she eats 1,800 to 2,000 calories a day. We don't have them count calories. We will give them a food plan based on food exchanges, but they need to be aware about roughly how much they need to eat more until the hypermetabolic state is corrected. You may wonder how I came up with a recommendation of 1,800 to 2,000 calories per day. And this is based on the predicted, which was 1,321. That's what's needed resting, or it's actually a bed rest, or you can in a coma. And then we add calories depending on the patient's activity. So she comes back 3 weeks later after having eaten the 800 to 2,000 calories, and her metabolism increased from 784 to 1426. So that looks good. And her protein substrate utilization went from 22% down to 6% above normal. So a decrease of 16%, which is great improvement. And the fat increased from 20% below to 3% below. So not fully corrected yet, but as I said earlier, it takes about 2 months to do that. And we do share these numbers with the patient so that they are clear on how their body has coped due to underfeeding and or overexercising and how it is correcting itself. Before we share the results of both these tests with the patient, we educate them about how many calories they need on a daily basis for heart, lungs, liver, kidneys, and brain to function. For example, we tell them about how your heart beats roughly 100,000 times a day, and you produce 2.5 million new red blood cells each second. And then we ask, do you think you're giving your body enough calories for all the work it's doing? And more often than not, do we have the answer, probably not. And then we share their results. And the results could be that they're either hypermetabolic, normal metabolic rate, or hypermetabolic, which is what we should have in athletes. If they are hypometabolic, we want to explain why, and we do that by comparing it to a fireplace. If you have a fireplace that has lots of nice logs, you have high flames and good energy, and we compare that with a body that is fueled with nice, good amount of food. But if in the fireplace you take away the logs and you have just a few logs, the flames will decrease, as will the energy. And the same happens in the human body. So another thing we see is the substrate utilization. Is the patient catabolic? Could they be insulin resistant? And also, does their actual resting energy expenditure make sense based on their intake and their activity? We know that reduced food intake has consequences, but some of them are invisible. But a visible change is that underfed bodies become hypometabolic, which we can prove with a test. But what they also relate to is an invisible change that they slowly but surely experience, but haven't really thought about. Because when we eat less, it also means that we get less carbohydrates. And this results in a decrease in the making of neurotransmitter in the brain and the gut, and particularly a neurotransmitter called serotonin, which is the happy, feel good neurotransmitter. This in turn leads to an increase in anxiety and depression and obsessive compulsive thinking, particularly around food and exercise and body image, as well as gastroparesis, which means it's poor, it has to do with poor gut function. As the serotonin level decreases in the body, the gut function slows down and individuals feel full much sooner and become very uncomfortable, possibly with nausea and or bloating if they eat more. As the gut function decreases, constipation often occurs. They feel full sooner on top of already feeling bloated and constipated. Now it hurts to eat, so they eat less. This becomes a vicious cycle, and now we make even less serotonin, and now noticeable changes in the thought process appear. They actually become a slave to their thoughts. They have to follow food rules and spend the day obsessing about everything they put in their mouth. That's what we refer to as Ed in the head, the eating disorder voice that has hijacked the brain and manipulating them to eat, manipulating them 24/7. In order for the patient to understand that health and fitness is so much more than a number on the scale, we ask non-scale related questions at every visit. And when the patient has been eating better, there are improvements in all these areas, and eventually they start connecting the dots. They are less constipated, they sleep better, they have more energy, and their mood is a lot better. So let's move on to the case studies. There'll be three very different ones. And the first one is a 17-year-old female. She's 5'5", weighs 118 pounds with a BMI of 19.5. Before she came in, she was eating 1,500 to 2,000 calories with 65 grams of protein. And she was a rower, exercising and practicing 2 hours, 6 days a week, and slept 7 hours. So actually now everything looks pretty normal, except for that she's 17 and has not have an onset of the period. And that's part of why she came in. She was on the varsity crew team and wanted to improve strength and time before the nationals. Part of her history is also that she was in gymnastics age 6 to 16, also at national levels. And her endocrinologist that she saw because of the amenorrhea wanted to start her on hormones, the Provera challenge, but she herself asked to see a nutritionist because she didn't feel her best. So her metabolic profile, we see she's hypometabolic, burning only 717 when predicted is 1415. And she has a protein substrate utilization of 19% above normal. She's both hypometabolic and catabolic. And she is breaking down her lean mass because of undereating and overexercising and pre-aging her body. If you compare the light blue bar to the dark blue, about more than double the rate. And she's not getting the energy she needs from fat because her body is underfueled and threatened and hanging on to fat for survival. Her body composition analysis confirmed what the metabolic test showed because her lean weight is 11 pounds below minimum and her face angle is also below minimum, confirming poor resiliency on a cellular level. So the test explained her own reason for coming. So initially she was eating 1,500 to 2,000 calories and we're told to increase them with 500 calories per week until we reach 3,000 a day. She was a very slow eater with severe gastroparesis, but with digestive enzyme, she was now able to eat. And after 3 months, her metabolic rate increased from 717 to 1264. Definitely improved, but she's still slightly hypometabolic. And her protein substrate came down from 19% to 7. So improved, but still catabolic. And the fat increase, she was started at 15 and now she's only 4% below normal. So her energy improved dramatically, as well as her performance in crew. And initially, she had had no hunger signals, and now she had strong signals and was actually ready to eat more. With the body composition, everything had improved. She actually gained 10 pounds and she got a period. So now the endocrinologist, the OBGYN, and the pediatrician all agreed that she was where she needed to be, but her lean is still below minimum and she's still hypometabolic and catabolic. So we upped the calories to 3,500. There was another 500 calories per day added because it's not based on her weight, but the recommendation is based on the test results. So a couple of months later, when we're now into the 9th month of treatment, her metabolic rate had increased from 1264 to 1723. And that's where we want her. She's an athlete. She should be above her predicted. So when her protein that started off very low now is actually below normal, she has gone from being catabolic to where you break down your own muscle to becoming anabolic, where she builds up a strong, good body. And her fat had improved from the -4 to being 5% now above normal, and she had more energy. So she could now trust her hunger. And what I call, when we start eating, I call that mechanical eating, can now transition over to intuitive eating, because we only can do intuitive eating when the actual resting energy expenditure is corrected. So intuitive eating means that she is now in charge and is honoring her own hunger and fullness cues. Like in her case, she was eating only 1,500 calories before she came in, but while refeeding, healing, and repairing her malnourished body, calories were increased up to 3,500 a day. And when recovered, she followed her own hunger and ended up eating around 2,500 calories, depending on her activity level. Body composition shows us now that her lean mass came up to 103 pounds, which is where she wants to be, where we want her to be. And her weight has increased from 118 to start, 128, once she got her period, up to 134, and then down to 129 pounds. And if you look at her fat weight, it actually is the same as when she started. And since she grew 1.5 inch, we now have her body fat being less than when she started. And this is an example. I mean, if you look at the face angle, that was well above minimum. And this is an example where the scale weight is not an indicator of an individual's health, but the test results are. The next case is a 17-year-old female. She's 5 feet, 92 pounds with a BMI of 18, eating 1,400 calories and 65 gram protein a day, and her weight fluctuated between 88 and 94. She runs 6 times a week for half an hour, and also has core workouts 3 times a week, 20 minutes. Sleeps 7 to 8 hours and has secondary amenorrhea. She's a serious cross-country runner, #1 on the varsity team, and doesn't like to have a period, particularly during the running season. She had her first period when she was 18, and since then had about 10 periods during the last 3 years. 2 years earlier, she had a stress fracture in the right femur, but no bone density test was done then. And she actually was applying to college as a runner. I had been working with her brother, who also was an athlete and wanted to increase his muscle mass. And he was very worried about her and wanted her to come in. Interestingly enough, the parents were okay with her not having a period because they figured she is a runner. So her metabolic profile shows us that her metabolism is only 417 when predicted is 1260. So severely hypometabolic and also catabolic, as you can see, protein substrate is 49% above normal. So she is breaking down her own protein 4 times normal, and the body is hanging on to fat for its life. Now, this is not to track fat, but it's to help them get more energy. But she said, I don't need more. I'm having, and she got her energy from the runner's high. Her body composition confirmed a malnourished and rundown body. And here you see her lean being below minimum, as is her face angle. So her intake needed to be increased from her 1,400 to 2,500 with 90 grams of protein, but of course in increments of 300 to 500 calories per week. We now found she was not only hypometabolic and catabolic, but there was anemia, vitamin D deficiency, and osteopenia. And she had pain in her hip flexor, and when combined with the osteopenia, she was told not to run or exercise. Now, this family lived out of state and she needed weekly support, so was referred to a local nutritionist and individual local therapist as well. So after 2 months, she comes back for being retested, and her metabolism had gone from 3 to 6 up to 897, and her protein substrate was much better, from 49% above came down to 5% above normal. She now also got a period. So now a coach wanted her to start running again, but I wanted calories up to 2,500 because her actual predicted resting energy should be a lot higher, particularly since she is an athlete. Looking at the body composition, you can see she gained about almost 5 pounds, but her lean is still below minimum, so she's still malnourished, and the face angle is also below minimum. But here she got a period. So now we had a long discussion about how you can menstruate and still be malnourished, because her body was clearly still repairing and healing. So her metabolic rate had improved after 4 months from the 897 up to 1225. So definitely better. And her protein substrate was also better, from 5% down to 3%. So improved, almost there. And if we look at the body comp, we see, though, that lean is still 3 pounds below minimum. An athlete should not be at minimum. She should be higher. So she's still malnourished and not fully recovered. And we were all kind of disappointed, but she admitted she hasn't been eating 2,500. She was eating closer to 2,200. And because the weight had scared her, and she was above what was for her an acceptable weight. So hopefully one more visit. And afterwards, she felt stronger. She had felt more muscular. She had greater energy. She was hungrier and had no more sweet cravings. So hopefully just one more visit. So she comes back, and her metabolism, look at that, it's just plummeted, went down from 1225 to 392. And we're all in shock. What happened? Well, she had reached 100 pounds, and she's 5 feet. And they all felt that 5 feet and 100 pounds, you're back to where you need to be. You don't need to gain anymore. And the local team allowed her to start running. And, parents, nutritionists, therapists, coached, all supported it. And she started to run 10 miles a day. And her protein substrate, that you can see, went from 3 above normal to 61, which is even worse than what she did at her initial visit when she was 49% above. It's like the body saying, don't mess with me. And when we look at the body composition, We see now that that's her weight is 100. And what happened with lean, though, was that she lost 1.5 pounds of lean, gained 3.5 pounds of fat, and lost zero point 0.1 of face angle. So 4 months later, her weight has increased. It's now 105 pounds. The metabolic rate has gone from the 392 up to 1532, where it should be, because she's an athlete, it should be above the predicted. And the protein substrate came down from 61% to 1% above normal, and fat is good. It was 58% below and is now 2% above. So this is what we call a corrected case. And looking at the body composition, she had gained 5 pounds, and the lean weight was up 0.7 and only put on 0.3 pounds of fat. And the face angle came up 0.2, putting her within normal range. So how would we have known without the metabolic test and the body composition? And at 105 pounds, she admitted that she had been in denial and that the tests had helped her respect her body. She now was more confident and decided to stop harming her body. And actually, she said, I'm actually happy that I can eat this much. So how do we explain this to the patients? Well, when you're not eating enough and or overexercising, your blood sugar drops and your body is sending you signals like hunger, growling stomachs for you to eat something. If you don't respond to those hunger signals, the brain still needs the glucose, because glucose from carbohydrate is the only source of fuel for the brain, but the brain can't store it. So how does it get it? Well, the liver has some stored glycogen, but we don't want to mess with the liver. So the body goes to the muscle where we have stored glycogen. So if you don't eat when you're hungry, the body needs to break down muscle to get to the glycogen to survive. And then the brain sends another signal. Alert, there's starvation or famine here. There's not enough food available. Hang on to fat for survival for as long as needed. So at the same time, the body decides to slow down, use as little energy as possible for survival. The K person's brain says, I'll save your life by reducing your metabolic rate. Thus, they have the hypermetabolic state. So this is the last case. It's a 39-year-old female in a larger sized body. She is 5'10", 270 pounds, and her intake, she's eating only 400 to 500 calories with 30 grams protein. Exercising is walking daily, an hour and a half, and she sleeps 7 to 8 hours, but has a medical history of bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety, PTSD, laxative abuse, and thyroid disease. She was brought up in South America and had been in the US for a couple of years. She was referred by a local psychiatrist who treated her for her bipolar disorder that she had had for the last 30 years. She had been passing out several times per week, and her weight was increasing, so the psychiatrist wondered what was going on. The patient was, of course, hoping that I could help her lose weight. When she was 14, she weighed over 200 pounds and was hospitalized for 3 months in order to lose weight. Her parents wanted her to lose weight, and she was put on an 800 calorie per day and lost 60 pounds. Now, she never learned how to nutritionally care for herself, but she knew that if she ate 800 calories a day, then she was a good girl. So when she had gained the weight back, which is, of course, has to happen, her parents threatened to not bring her on vacation or to disown her, and they put a lock on the fridge so that she wouldn't gain more weight. To get food, she spent the afternoons mostly at her friend's house. And part of the history is also that 10 years ago, she had been abusing laxatives up to 30 a day. Her metabolic profile shows a metabolic rate of 1,446 and predicted being 1912, so slightly hypermetabolic, and eating only 500 calories a day and with a protein substrate of 11% above normal explained why she occasionally passed out. And a fat substrate of 41% below explained why she was still gaining weight and complained of low energy. Her high carbohydrate substrate utilization indicated insufficient breakdown of carbohydrate, and could she possibly be insulin resistant? Body composition showed a low face angle, confirming her poor resiliency. So here we have medically that she is atypical anorexia, hypometabolic, catabolic. And when I explained to her that she was a higher weight anorectic, she started crying. Nobody had ever told her that. It was hard to take in, but she also felt relieved. Maybe there was help for this. And being hypometabolic explained why she wasn't hungry. And then could she be insulin resistant? Her intake had to be increased with about 500 calories a day until we reached over 2,000. And she was giving digestive enzymes to help her able to eat more food. After 3 months, her metabolic rate had increased from 1446 to 2219, and the protein substrate came down from 11 to 4%, and fat burning increased from 41 to only 19% below normal. Carbohydrate substrate decreased from 30 to 15%. And for the first time in a long time, she felt hunger. She was more relaxed, she slept better, no more fainting spells, no headaches, no constipation, and she enjoyed her daily walks. Her lean, as you can see, stayed the same and her face angle increased, but she stepped on the scale, although told not to, and she started to worry about getting fat. She started restricting, her energy decreased, she felt out of control. The eating disorder voice in her head grew very, very strong, and the fear to gain weight was huge. Eating meant for her doing something wrong, the old childhood message, and also eating more had brought up more feelings from past trauma. She had told us that she actually had been raped when she was 21. So she went into a severe deep depression with suicidality and needed a higher level of care, and went into residential treatment for 50 days. After 50 days, her at the PHP program, the calories were kept there over 2,000 a day, and there's no way to avoid any meals or snacks. And thus, her metabolic rate increased from 2219 to 2705, and protein substrate came down from 4 to 1%, and the fat increased 19 to only 11 below normal. And also the carbohydrate came down from 15 to 7%. So with this PHP program, there was structured eating 5 times a day, and her face angle increased from 5'9" to 6'5", and the lean weight stayed high, and her total weight was down actually 11 pounds. She learned that other people suffered too, and that she needed to get rid of her guilt while eating. She felt stronger, and her energy, mood, and concentration all improved. She worked on her relationships and noticed that she was more satisfied, that she connected better with people. And she said about the program, "I've never hugged so many people. They were all so emotional, and I felt so accepted regardless of weight." So 7 months later, she still kept up with all her good work. Her health had improved, the weight gain had stopped, and she had lost a total of 15 pounds, and her face angle increased, so she's stronger on a cellular level. She continued with IFS therapy, felt that it was very helpful and healing. It helped her find a safe place inside herself. Her body image improved, and she felt an increase in purpose and wanted to figure out what to do next, maybe becoming a coach. Needless to say, she needs to stay in treatment for a long time, but nobody had explained to her that she was under eating, and she now felt she got a new chance on life. So in terms of testimonials, they are available in the book I wrote with Caroline Hodges 5 years ago called Measuring Health from the Inside. There is one chapter for every different eating disorder, and each chapter has cases and also testimonials from our patients. And in conclusion, I want to say eat, don't diet. Dieting results in muscle loss and fat increase, as you've seen in the cases. And nourish to flourish. Get the energy the body needs and deserves. And any individual can become hypometabolic, which you saw in all the three cases. And it's not about a calorie in, a calorie out equation. Everybody has a K-person brain guiding the body to store fat, even if already in a larger body. The muscle mass of the individual always needs to be taken into consideration with any dietary intervention, because the recommendation of the right amount of protein, we need to protect the body from being catabolic. And you must correct a hypometabolic state before initiating any type of dietary intervention, before recommending intuitive eating. Because when hypometabolic, you don't have enough hunger signals to support your body's needs. Also, we need more than a scale weight to assess an individual's nutritional status, which we saw in all the three cases. And metabolic testing helps dispel the diet mentality. We see it all the time. We have patients who we have worked with and restored, and then they come back 6 months or a year later after being on one diet or the other. The metabolism then has dropped, the scale was down, yes, but it was all lean tissue and water that they lost. Metabolic testing helps educate the individuals how to trust that eating more is what the body needs and deserves. They can stop controlling the food. And the patient is relieved, does not feel judged, but understood. And it also gives them a sense of hope and permission to eat more and to be at peace with themselves. So using the metabolic tests in combination with body composition analysis have, during the 20 years that I've used them, made me humble and respectful of our different individual needs and how we all differ in shape and form. And it's my hope that the Kahm Clinic can add something valuable to your eating disorder population, something that adds quality and hope to both clinician and for patients to fully recover. Thank you for joining me today and for taking the time to learn about the way, at least from a nutritionist point of view, there is more to recovery than the number on the scale. And if you have any further questions, please feel free to contact us at www.thekahmclinic.com. Thank you and stay well.